Kevin Kelley, thank you so much for being here with us today.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
We're going to start by talking about crime and safety, two issues very much at the mind of Cleveland voters.
Yes.
What is the most important police reform you will pursue as mayor?
Well, let's start with the very basics. We need to make sure that we are staffing the police at the level the council authorized. We need to make sure that we fill all the openings in specialty units in sex crimes and domestic violence, homicide detectives. We need to make sure that we're giving the police the tools and the support that they need to do this very difficult job. So another thing we need to make sure that we institute is wellness for the officers themselves. We are asking officers to respond to 20 to 30 calls for service in one shift. And as a former social worker, I know that when you're dealing with people in crisis, it's exhausting, and we're really the fact that we are so understaffed is putting a strain on those specialty units that I mentioned, but also on the men and women in the zone cars. So we need to start with the very basics, and that's the starting point for me.
Okay. Has the consent decree that Cleveland has been under, has that led to necessary reforms? Do you think it's achieved its goals?
It has achieved some of them, but we are not done with it. Let me tell you about what I believe to be the most important steps forward that the consent decree has brought. The crisis intervention training that all officers now have. I think that is a very positive step forward. The de-escalation training that every officer goes through is a very important part of the consent decree. And then other reforms such as body cams, but we're not where we need to be in terms of putting in place the type of technology so that the officers can spend less time on paperwork and have more transparent reporting of the reports. The consent decree today has been, we've met many of the milestones, but there's still a long way to go.
And does that require more spending to reach some of those other milestones?
Well, the consent decree by its very nature involves spending, but it's not that we have not achieved the milestones because of the spending. The money has been allocated, and quite frankly, as part of the agreement that we are a party with the DOJ, we are required to budget for it. So it isn't as if there's going to be money's going to solve this. It's going to be a matter of continuing down the path that we're going down to make these reforms.
What will you do to make residents across the city feel more safe?
So of the 3 pillars of my safety plan, the first I talked about, which is making sure that our police officers have the training and the tools they need to do the job. The second is a true community policing model. So if you ask the first 100 people you see, you'll probably get 100 different definitions of what that is. When I'm mayor, what it's going to mean is this. Where every neighborhood will have a community safety center like the old mini stations. There'll be general police orders that the districts do foot patrol, bike patrol. I've been fortunate enough to be able to accompany the officers of the 2nd District on foot patrol, bike patrol throughout the ward that I represent. And that's where you really get the feel for what's happening in the neighborhoods. That, talking to a resident on their street, on their porch, you'll learn a whole lot more than reviewing calls for service. So we're going to make sure that the officers are on the streets, are talking to people, and that every district has 2 things: a true community relations committee. We have a very active community relations committee in the 2nd District, and a very well-functioning community service unit, which responds to calls for service that are generally quality of life issues. It's a special unit set up just for those quality of life issues. But we really need to make sure that our policing strategy mirrors every neighborhood that we police. And the only way that you can really tailor that plan is to make sure that we're doing those community-based interventions that I discussed: foot patrols, bike patrols, community relations committee, community service unit, and just making sure that we really fully understand all the uniqueness of every Cleveland neighborhood.
And you mentioned the mini stations as being part of that community policing model. Would you actually bring those back, or just something?
That's my goal. That is part of my plan.
All right.
Yeah.
Let's talk about illegal dirt bike riders.
Yes.
You know, not only have they become a symbol of lawlessness in the city, but they do pose a real safety risk.
Yes.
How do you plan to address that issue?
So the city of Cleveland currently has an ordinance prohibiting it, so it's not as if it's not illegal. But what we really need to do is come up with an enforcement strategy that doesn't cause more harm than good. These are, as you mentioned, these are dangerous situations when somebody's riding a dirt bike through city streets, but to chase them to, what is the proper way to stop this? I think we need to start looking at, They have to fill up gas stations. They have to fill their tanks up. We need to involve the community to where they see them. And then we just really have to make sure that when there's a call, that it becomes a priority call, that these dirt bikes are at a certain intersection, they're gassing up, they are fueling. We need to make sure that the police respond quickly, because you need to stop them. And then at that point, that's where you can start looking at, is that dirt bike stolen? Is it properly owned? Where are they going? They can't leave on the streets to wherever they're going. If it's dirt, that's got to be towed. So we just have to have a different strategy, but we have to just start by acknowledging this is a serious problem and putting in place a strategy that is going to stop it. And it might involve working with other actors. If it's something that is on I-90 or something that has a different jurisdiction, State Highway Patrol, maybe that's where we need to work with them. So there's a way to stop this. We just have to make sure that it will be a priority of mine as mayor.
Along those lines, do you support the city's current police chase policy?
So the current chase policy got a lot of attention during some recent carjackings that took place. The policy itself is a good policy. The policy could be thinned out a little bit. It's a 17-page policy that discusses when to chase and when not. And I think right now what we need to do is provide the officers with more guidance in terms of what is a proper chase. Right now, the safe position is to not initiate a pursuit. Mm-hmm. And I think that that's the default position, because there's not enough support, there's not enough supervisors. Maybe it's a matter of having a second supervisor check in and say, yes, this is a proper pursuit, pursue. Right now, it's because it's such it's a 17-page policy, and there's not enough guidance for the officers. The default is to not pursue. So the pursuit policy itself is a good policy, but it needs to be thinned out. It needs to have more support for the person making the decision. And so I think we don't scrap the whole thing. We work with what we have, but we make sure that we have a more understandable pursuit policy.
Great. We're going to move on to economy and recovery now. Mm-hmm. What's the first thing you will do as mayor to help the city recover from the pandemic?
The first thing I'm going to do is focus where the issue is. And if you look at who has really been hurt by COVID, it's been our restaurant operators, street-level retail, hospitalities industry. We need to make sure, through using American Recovery Act dollars, that we support that base of the economy. Because I believe that if we support that part of the economy, other benefits are going to come. People ask, are people going to come back downtown, or is this the new normal? And I tell people all the time, people want to come downtown. People don't want to be in their kitchens working, but people don't want to come downtown and work because they love their cubicle. They love the vibrancy of what is downtown, the restaurants, the street level retail, just seeing people out on the sidewalk. So I think that that will be the first short-term plan. But if we talk about our economy, one thing that's going to be my long-term plan that is going to start on day one is we really have to start looking at what is the foundation of our economy. All too often I'm asked, what am I going to do to bring jobs to Cleveland? And I frequently say, okay, let's just start with this. You're asking the wrong question. Right now, we have thousands of open, available, high-paying jobs in healthcare, in skilled manufacturing, in information services, in skilled trades. Our problem is that our people aren't trained, our citizens are not trained to take the jobs that are available. And that's a tragedy, because we have, take healthcare for example. If we're the healthcare capital of the world, but we can't find the 4,000 nurses that are projected to be needed by 2024, we're not going to continue to be. And we have these great institutions, but within 1 square mile, we have people that are unemployed and underemployed. How can we live, how can we as a community think that this is okay? When we're leaving so many people behind, yet we need all these people to fill these important positions so that we can move our economy forward. I'm not waiting for the next big thing to fall out of the sky. I'm not waiting for Amazon HQ 2 or 3 to come save us. We save ourselves by investing in the citizens that are here, the assets, the industry that we have here. That's where we need to invest. And if we can bring this together, that's going to be the foundation of our economy, not some outside force that's going to come in and save us. But we have to really start stop being comfortable with the terms workforce development or skills gap. We need to understand that people are hurting because they don't have jobs, yet industry is hurting because they don't have workers. That should be a reality that is not acceptable to anybody, and that will be the foundation of our economy.
You mentioned the American Rescue Act.
Yes.
How some of those dollars are already spent. You talked about how you would spend some of them. What else would be your priority with that $500 million?
Broadband, we have to, again, when we're talking about terms we've become too comfortable with, digital divide is a term we've become too comfortable with. I would like to just kind of restate it, that if you have access to a device and broadband, you have an opportunity to succeed. If you don't, you will most surely be left behind. And we saw this when COVID hit, when CMSD sent home 18,000 scholars knowing that they didn't have either a device or broadband access. And did we really think those kids were those young scholars were to continue to prosper and thrive? I don't think we can honestly, say that the answer to that question is yes. We have to make sure that every resident in the city of Cleveland has access to knowledge, opportunity, the same as everywhere in the region, in the nation, and the world, because this really is, the census is going to, the recently released results of the census, are going to indicate that we are one of the least connected big cities in the country. We cannot move forward. I talked about the other kind of building blocks of our economy, the foundational elements. This is a foundational element of our economy, is to make sure that our citizens have access to information and opportunity. If we don't, we cannot move forward. So broadband is going to be a place where we start. Second initiative that I think is very important is at City Hall, I had the experience of unpleasant of seeing queued up in the Muni lot was the food bank and cars of people that were lined up to get food. This is one of those moments where you just realize that there's just something drastically wrong with what's happening in our world and our community today. So part of the expenditure of these dollars is going to be to assist the food bank with their mission. And we really have to acknowledge the crisis, but they're doing a great job. They have really struggled through this difficult time, so we need to support the food bank. We need to look at lead paint poisoning. We have been talking about lead paint poisoning for too long in this community, and we need to prioritize that, and I believe that is an eligible expenditure for American Recovery Act dollars. And another thing I want to do is just make a statement that any Clevelander who wants to work should work, and we need to have a job for them. So a lot of people were left behind when COVID hit. The economy hurt those at the lower end of our economy the hardest. I want to put together a jobs program that will guarantee that if you want work, there will be a job for you, and it's going to be in the community. It's going to be people from the community working on projects in our community. Whether it's a park program, a public works program, similar to the WPA program of so many decades ago.
Excellent. You talked a little bit about the digital divide already. I was going to segue us into education now. What is the first thing you will do as mayor to make up for the educational losses that have already been suffered by Cleveland's public school children?
Thank you. That is something I think about a lot. I'm a CMSD dad, and I really watched how this, first off, let me say that the district did a decent job of taking a crisis and putting together a good short-term solution. But when I'm looking over my daughter's shoulder and when she's doing her assignments, and the teachers also had to instruct, well, if you're on a MacBook, you need to put it in AirDrop and upload it, and if you're on a Chromebook, we lost a year. Now, I don't know that every student lost a year, but the first thing that I'm going to do is start with a basic assessment of what did we lose. Now, if it's at all possible that we can support those scholars that fell behind through additional interventions and keep them at grade level, that's job one. However, if grades need to be repeated as a last resort, we need to do that as well, because we're not helping that scholar if we promote them and they're doing material that they're not prepared for. But it really starts with an honest assessment of what did we lose, and letting the scholars know that it's not their fault. They didn't cause COVID. It's not their fault that their parents didn't have weren't able to afford a computer for them or broadband access. So we just as a community need to understand how important our young people are, our young scholars are to the future of our city and our community and our world, and treat it with that urgency. So we really have to assess what was lost, and we need to design interventions on a case-by-case, student-by-student, scholar-by-scholar basis to make sure that we bring everybody back to where they need to be to move forward.
Let's talk about some broader city issues. This obviously just in the news over the last month or so.
Yep.
How do you feel about the public funding of the proposed renovation of Progressive Field?
I would start with when you look at that deal, I have not seen the term sheet. I know generally what the parameters are, but when we evaluate this deal, we have to start with the basic knowledge that that is a publicly owned building. Okay, so start there, and the City of Cleveland, although Gateway is the title owner, the City of Cleveland is responsible if ever there's not a tenant. If the Indians Guardians were to leave, the city would be responsible for all of the upkeep, all of the capital, all the maintenance, or, God forbid, the demo of this building. I think that it is critical that we keep the Guardians in the City of Cleveland. And looking at the terms that I know, and I'm going to dig into the term sheet in the very near future, and it's going to go before council. It's always a but-for question. You know, but for the public acts that will be taken, is there a return to the general fund? Is there a return to the community? And I look at a few things. I start with the hard dollars. What does this building, what does this team mean for the general fund, and what does it generate for the City of Cleveland? And then there's the intangibles, like, you know, because it's harder to say exactly that caused economic development around it, but look at the vitality that's created around the ballpark. So I am looking forward to moving to learning about the proposed lease extension. The values I hold those, I want to keep the team because the Progressive Field has been very good for the City of Cleveland financially. The team did the most recent addition, or renovations, I should say, $40 million, all on their own nickel. They didn't come and ask for anything but a permit. So I think that there's a value in keeping this as an economic development node in the downtown neighborhood.
You mentioned the census data.
Yes.
Yesterday we learned a little bit more. Cleveland lost another 6% of its population.
Yes.
What's the most important action you can take as mayor to reverse that trend?
Some of the loss that we're seeing, beginning, so we started counting in 2010 after the 2010 census, yes, is from the prior recession and the housing disaster that took place across the nation, especially in the City of Cleveland, especially in certain zip codes in the City of Cleveland. We need to look at making sure that we're providing, good, safe, decent quality housing options for every Clevelander first. We need to make sure that there is a housing opportunity for every Clevelander that chooses to live in Cleveland. We have to continue to push forward with progress in our schools, because that is the most important, safety in schools are the most important things that go into people's decisions of where they're going to locate and see their future. We talked about safety a lot. We need to make sure that we are continuing down the path of providing a safer community for people to live in. So we really need to look at, it's not good to have lost 6%. What is the trend? What is the pattern? What can we do to stop this? And then we need to also look at other possible ways that we can reverse this, and we need to look at maybe being a more open city for immigration. We need to do more recruiting of refugee communities, and we need to also understand that this isn't the only indicator of a community's health. If there's a lot of other indicators that to me are more important than just the population alone. That being said, this is not great news for the City of Cleveland, but I do think it provides us an opportunity to look at what are we doing, and again, how do we encourage people who are here to stay, encourage people who once lived here to move back, and how do we become more opening to the immigration, for the refugee community, and just really solidify the base population of Cleveland.
Does Cleveland have a systemic race problem that divides us, and how will you address that?
Yes, we have a systemic race problem, and it's been dividing us for over 400 years. So we have to start by being realistic. We are not going to reverse over 400 years of racism in 4 years, but we can take significant steps forward. First step is just kind of acknowledging that it exists, not existed, but it currently exists, and the components of racism have permeated a lot of what we do currently. One example is when one of the first major things I did as council president, the first initiatives was to deal with our shameful rate of infant mortality in the city of Cleveland and in Cuyahoga County. So when we formed First Year Cleveland, we really did a deep dive of why are babies dying before their first birthday? And what we found, and we changed a lot of people's assumptions, it wasn't the prenatal care of the mother, it wasn't the education level, it wasn't whether they had insurance. The one determinative factor, the most determinative factor of whether a baby loses their first birthday is the race of the mother. Now, that was shocking, but maybe it shouldn't have been. And because if you look at the problems that we have, whether it's infant mortality, lead poisoning, where the high crime areas, if you put that on a heat map of Cleveland, undergirding all of that is race and poverty. So we need to deal with that on day one, knowing that we're not going to finish it at the end of 4 years. But it's got to be a priority, and it's got to be an acknowledgement that this isn't something that once existed, this is something that exists now.
Yeah, and you mentioned healthcare inequities
Yes.
as part of that, and that's an extension there.
Well, can I talk about healthcare inequities?
Yeah. Yeah.
So when I'm mayor, your life expectancy and healthcare, your health outcomes are not going to be determined by your zip code. And right now they largely are. And I just want to point to something that we're doing in Old Brooklyn, the area I represent, that is going to happen citywide. The Old Brooklyn Community Development Corporation made the step of treating public health as a community development issue. So we're going beyond bricks and mortar projects and taking on the issue of community health. So what did we do with that? We started by doing a community health needs assessment. And we weren't asking the questions of when you saw your doctor or who's your health insurance provider. We asked the questions of, do you live within a 10-minute walk of a park? Do you have access to fresh food? Do you feel safe in your neighborhood? Do you have a job? Is there a school that you feel comfortable sending your kids to? Do you know your neighbors to your left and to your right? And we use those questions to formulate policy. After this assessment, we realized we need a farmer's market in Old Brooklyn to serve our community. And I was surprised at the number of families on public assistance on SNAP that could use those dollars at our farmer's market. But by doing that, we're providing fresh food. That's the type of approach I'm going to take citywide, is we're going to take a different look at health equities, and every neighborhood is going to be on the same footing, because we're going to start with that base level assessment of what are the health needs of each neighborhood. And again, it's not doctor stuff, it's not the clinical stuff, it's these quality of life issues that really form the picture of neighborhood health.
Everyday health. Now, as you're aware, Clevelanders have been calling for a public comment at council meetings, as well as a participatory budget process. What will you do to encourage citizen participation in city decisions?
So on Wednesday, I have forwarded to our rules committee a change in the rules that would allow public comment. And this is something that's not been a part of our council process for 225 years. So this is something that I instituted. People brought it to our attention, and I took the appropriate actions. Now, that being said, if people really want to be involved in the legislative process, in the decision-making process, there are plenty of opportunities that currently exist. At the local level, we have design review for every significant project that goes through. City planning, their council members, they need to be in touch with their council member. What I've found in doing this isn't that it's too hard for people to participate. When you have town hall meetings, you have community meetings, hardest thing I find is getting people to show up at those meetings and to be involved. Because the Monday night meeting is one area where there wasn't public participation, but a lot of the decisions are made by the time we get to Monday night. I would encourage people to start when the issue first arises, and start with your local representative, start with your local design review, start with planning commission. Don't let it if it gets to the Monday night meeting, you're showing up at the Monday night meeting, there's a good chance that you're going to be less effective than if you had started at the very front end. And I, in the neighborhood I represent, we're always encouraging participation. We had community meetings for the Pearl Road Street Resurfacing Project. We had community meetings for a proposed dollar store on Memphis Avenue. We have community meetings for everything. Again, the hardest thing is getting people to participate at those levels. But listening to citizens is the most important thing you can do in this job.
Okay, time for our lightning round now.
Great.
So again, just kind of whatever comes to you quickly for this.
Yep.
What's your favorite city park?
Low Park.
Who has been the best mayor in your lifetime?
Frank Jackson.
Cleveland Indians, Cavs, or Browns?
All three.
Safe answer. If you triage City Hall departments right now, which one needs emergency surgery?
Department of Health.
Burke Lakefront Airport, keep it open or close it?
That is something where an irresponsible politician will just say close it. It's a complicated issue. It is something where you have to consider both the real estate and the operations. It's a long-term answer. There's a developable part of Burke, but it must remain open as a reliever airport.
What's your favorite Cleveland restaurant?
The Harp.
Who is your second choice for mayor?
I might write in Blaine Griffin.
Cleveland's corporate community, friend or foe?
Both.
What's your workout routine or pastime?
Every morning I run 3 to 5 miles. I purchased a Concept 2 rowing machine with my COVID stimulus. I've got a small amount of weights at home, and I used to go through Saturdays, but I just go Monday through Friday now.
Okay. Why should we vote for you?
Because I bring both the experience, the vision, the passion, the love for this city, and I will be ready to be mayor and lead on day one. And I represent a path forward, not a path backwards, and not somebody that is going to, there's going to be no on-the-job training with me.
Along those lines, time for your tough question. You have been a partner with Mayor Frank Jackson on many issues in the city. He just endorsed you.
Yes.
But you are, in essence, running against his tenure in some ways. For voters who don't like Jackson or the city that they're seeing today, how are you going to be different and not Frank Jackson 2.0?
Sure. I would tell those voters to look back to the bold progressive actions that the city has undertaken in the recent past. And I would suggest that those came out of the council and those came under my leadership. Let me just name a few. Right to counsel for indigent defendants. That's something that I sponsored, that I shepherded through. I worked with Legal Aid, I worked with United Way, and we came up with a solution that's going to prevent eviction, it's going to prevent poverty. In addition, we put money with CHN Housing Partners for eviction support. Racism is a public health crisis. That's something that came from the council. That is something that just happened in June of this year, but it is, or excuse me, June of this year, and it is something that we pushed forward and we built the infrastructure for it. The committees are meeting now, and there's going to be tangible results. Take another step back to Lead Safe Cleveland. Go back another step. First Year Cleveland, which I mentioned earlier. That's something that was an initiative that came as I was council president, and it was something, both the formation of First Year Cleveland, the funding of First Year Cleveland, the application for Medicaid dollars happened as I was council president. I'm very proud of my record as council president. We've had a great council, we have a great relationship, and I'm happy to have worked with the mayor on a lot of big initiatives as well, because you have to remember, as a member of the legislative body, we legislate, we authorize. The executive branch of the government is what executes and spends and oversees. So if you look at the different roles that we've occupied, I'm very proud of what I've done as council president, and I'm very proud of how I've worked with the administration.
Kevin Kelley, thank you so much.
Thanks, Sarah.